You shaped it in your mind. Total performance. Now the all-new Toyota Supra brings it alive. Super power, created by a 3-liter 24-valve, 200-horsepower engine. Super suspension, racing type, double wishbone, fully independent. Super cockpit, where you perform. The new Toyota Supra. Performance without compromise. Now the Supra dynasty begins. Who could ask for anything more?
When planning my ultimate Supra build, I struggled with balancing the nostalgic and original design of the car and adding the newer amenities. My goal is to take this car, make it reliable, fast and fun, and also keep the feeling of a comfortable grand touring vehicle. Keeping the factory air conditioning, making oil changes a breeze, and cooling the oil equally as well as the factory Aristo oil cooler did. When planning the 2JZ swap and looking at the factory Aristo oil cooler, I could see that there was going to be a little bit of conflict with space in changing the oil with the oil filter, running the AC lines, and just having room to work in this area. There's also a guard for the steering linkage that the filter butts right against. Pair that up with using a slightly larger than factory oil filter to get a little better oil filtration. And it's just a recipe for frustration and oil spills all over the place when you're doing an oil change. This oil filter might look like it's really easily accessible, but what you're not seeing here is the power steering fluid reservoir and other wiring and hoses that are in this area. It really just doesn't look very inviting to me. I just want to make this vehicle really easy to maintain and enjoyable to drive overall. So now I have to put my thinking cap on and try to make this build as reliable as possible. As you may know, one of the disadvantages to using an oil cooler is when you're in colder climates, your oil thickens, and the passages in most oil coolers are fairly small. You want to prevent oil starvation in your motor. So when thinking about this, you want to add a thermostat that allows oil to flow and bypass the cooler when it's cold, and when reaching optimal temperature, open and allow oil to flow through the cooler, cooling the oil and no longer restricting any flow. No oil starvation, cool oil are two very key components to keeping your motor happy. Once removing the factory Aristo oil cooler from the 2JZ, you're faced with a port that is a return feed for the coolant, as well as a supply that originates from the water pump. One of the other things I wanted to also bear in mind was being able to order the factory coolant lines and have them all fit and not have to have any kind of specialty lines for this build. I also wanted to keep it looking very nice and trim and keep all of the hoses minimally seen. So when doing this, it required me to make some hard lines that ran across the hot side of the motor near the exhaust manifold and around the back of the 2JZ block. That way, the factory coolant hose could hook up exactly like the 7M did, and it wouldn't require any specialty hoses. It also is really out of sight. To do this, I used the factory 7M non-turbo hardlines that were connected to the water pump. The 7M hardline configuration has two hardlines that are attached together with brackets. I separated the two hardlines by cutting the brackets and then shaved away the remaining bracket material from the hardline. The 7M coolant hardline was the perfect shape. However, it was a bit too long, and the 2-bolt flange that connects to the back of the water pump was not oriented properly. I cut the end of the 7M hardline off to the perfect length for the 2J and welded on a new 2-bolt flange for the 2J water pump. I then reused the factory 2J hardline clamps to secure the hardline to the back of the 2J block, and this prevented any kind of vibration and properly secured the hardline to the block. I'm also showing you how tight this line is. You probably could have added a little bit more room for clearance. I cut my pipe just a little too short. If I were to do it again, I would probably add just a little bit more room in the back side of the block. I've had it in use for a little over a year now, and it's been working great. And as you can see, it's contoured very nicely to the block and fits very nicely. To keep this video as condensed as possible, I decided to share air conditioning in another video. Air conditioning lines are going to be very close to this oil system, and I think they play a role hand in hand when deciding how you're going to configure this build. Next, I'll cover how to install the oil cooler as well as how to install the remote oil filter. Okay, so we're unboxing this G Plus oil cooler kit. We got it on eBay. It was relatively inexpensive. I want to say around $150. And what it came with was basically two portions of this. There's one that's actually on the 2JZ block right now, very similar to this, but it's on there to adapt the oil filter fittings to an in and out AN10 fitting. So that's currently on the block, as I said. This is the other section that basically allows you to relocate the oil filter. Since the oil filter was buried in the driver's side fender with the factory oil cooler on the Aristo 2JZ, we decided to go with an outbound oil cooler. There's a little bit of apprehension that I have, and I want to try to get some fail safes built into this. So anyways, I'll discuss that now. I do have my pressure sending unit on here, so I can actually, watch it on the gauge, make sure I have good oil pressure outbound. I also have a digital gauge that we'll be using for the engine management computer. So in the kit, again, came 3 lines, pretty high end. At least they seem to be pretty nice AN10 fitting and nice braided lines. So those are there. We'll probably have to change the lengths of them a little bit. This is a 16 or 18 row cooler. Should be plenty adequate for what we need it for. And I bought a separate thermostat so that we can promote no oil going through the cooler when the oil temperature is low. So when the oil temperature is not up to temperature, it'll bypass this cooler and just continue to run through the oil filter unrestricted. And then as the oil warms up, this will open up and allow oil to pass through the oil cooler. So that's a good idea to do when you have heavier weight of oil as well as a cooler climate, because the oil passages in this are somewhat restricted, and you don't want to in any way inhibit oil flow, obviously, in your motors. You have a pretty good opening size here. AN10, again, in and out, and I'm not sure what it looks like inside. I really haven't looked in there, but I do know just from feedback of others that using a thermostat in this situation is the best way to go. So that's what we're doing. So you basically have, unfortunately, a lot of connections to worry about. You're going to have 2 on this, in and out. You're going to have an in and out on this, and this is actually going to have 4 fittings, so 4 AN10 fittings. So next thing we have to do is figure out where to put it all and how to run all the lines, I should say. So we'll work on that right now. So we're going to install this remote oil filter holder,
and I've got a few of the items attached to it. Be used for the factory oil pressure gauge, as well as the Aristo pressure sending unit. So I'm going to try to use this again. These are all 1/8 inch NPTs. I use this little adapter here so that I could swing this guy out of the way. So I've been back and forth about where to mount this, where it would be easiest, and so on and so forth. I'm going to have to use some 90 high flow connectors. Essentially what I've done is I've taken the factory tow hitch hook here, and I just kind of wire wheeled it off and gave it a good spray. I built this guy here, this little bracket here, to be able to mount this guy so that we can use a filter wrench kind of through here to remove the oil filter. Some guys have mounted the oil cooler in this little corner here, and I don't really like that because this is the cooled air going into the engine. I don't want to have this, you know, have a mass of hot air in this area. I don't want to warm it up whatsoever. I want to use the intercooler to do its job and cool. So basically, I happen to have some of this angled steel, and essentially what I've done here is it's just kind of a simple fabrication here so that this is mounted here like so. It's as close to the edge of the plate as I can make it, and basically with in mind that we are essentially going to mount it. Where are the holes there? So we're going to mount it on top of the factory tow hook, and I wanted to have this down far enough where I could put the factory bolt in. So I'm going to actually install this right now. This is a 17 millimeter. So with that being as large as it is, and this being such thick steel, I'm sure it's supposed to have a pretty high torque rating. So I'm going to give it a couple good ooga googas. Okay. So what we have here, again, a little window here around this elbow with the intercooler pipe. If I can get the so I got a little, again, let's see, I'll put you back down here for a minute. Better perspective here. All right, so I'm gonna redo some of this. This is the factory wiring the way it was. I'm gonna, make all this nicer and probably route some more wiring, some upgraded horns for the front here. So I've got a little bit more wiring to do. I'm also going to, run some wires to these front sensors here. Essentially, that's what it looks like right here. These AN fittings are gonna be pretty tight in here. So, but it's actually going to probably work out just the way I want, where the lines will actually fit nice and tucked away right here on this upper portion here, and they'll stay clear of the light. So basically what I'm thinking is, I'll show you here in a second. I'll grab a wrench. Essentially what I want to do here is essentially take this guy here and be able to spin on and off the filter. Be able to, from underneath, come in here and spin this filter on and off, and I'm replacing the filter, and have something nice and beefy to change the filter with. I've got obviously tightened down this upper hardware, but it's going to be nice and it's not going to go anywhere. Safe, from hitting anything or rubbing anything or in a collision. It should be, tucked away in a nice area. Again, I'm just concerned about losing oil pressure. Once that happens, we're, going to toast the engine pretty quickly. Also, I just added a fuel pressure regulator. I kind of mocked up the catch-can lines just to kind of see what it would look like with the fuel pressure regulator. And that's essentially how I have the fuel pressure regulator installed. A lot of people install it in this general vicinity, but I don't think they install it exactly like this. The only bad thing that I'm going to run into is, when I run my wire on this top portion here, it's going to, have to rest somewhere here. I could always grind these flat if I want to, and just let the wire molding ride on top of that, and that would be fine. I went back and forth about where to place this. I kind of like it here most. I've got the return line going back to the fuel tank. This is the kit that you can buy from Drift Motion. Let's see. I cut the line. It's basically connected down there. It's the return line. Goes down to that busy intersection. You've basically got this black hose, which is the return. It's right here. And that's basically going to the bottom of the fuel pressure regulator. So that basically is all the excess pressure above 42 PSI goes out this hose and back to the fuel tank. And let's see, and we also have the AN line from the back of the radian manifold into a 90 AN 6, and then into the side of the fuel pressure regulator. So essentially I'm trying to get all this stuff knocked out so that I can start wiring. I just kind of want to run the wire, around all this stuff when I make my harness, and I just want to keep it clean. I kept the factory Supra plate here so that it looks nice and keeping it OEM looking. This install, seen a lot of people bury stuff in front of that. I'm going to try to avoid that. I found a good condition coolant line, and basically this is I believe it's the return from the inside heater core. And as you probably recall earlier, I went through great lengths to replicate the connection in the back of the block. Let's see if I can get a good peek. You can barely see the clamp kind of staring at you down there. that's basically where it's being fed from. And that goes all the way to the back of the water pump on the other side, on the passenger side of the 2JZ. So that's a direct shot, and essentially goes, you know, right into this hose, just like the 7M did, and pretty much keeping all the coolant pretty much factory, just like it was with the 7M. As you can see, I've got the what would have been the factory oil cooler return line that's in the side of the block there. I've got a coolant sensor. Again, that's going to be for the factory gauge in the dash. I'm going to use a different sensor, coolant sensor, for the ECU. And there, basically, you can see is my plate for the oil. The middle being the return line. It's connected right now, again with a 90 high flow AN fitting, AN 10. And I'm going to start running those as well and install the oil cooler, which I have over here. So I'm going to probably put this oil cooler down in here. I started making some brackets and I drilled some holes here, equal distance. I just want to kind of, I have a good mounting tabs that I've built for the top here, but I'm a little concerned about, you know, this kind of like compression fitting at the top here with this plate and vibration. So I'm definitely going to want to anchor the bottom, and that's kind of where my problem is right now. I've got to find some way of anchoring it to the bottom of the radiator support and not rubbing the air conditioning lines. So I've got to do that. No, that isn't rust, that's factory undercoating. It's actually a pretty rust-free car. So there's the air conditioning dryer. And as you know, air conditioning has been a pretty big dilemma with this car. This is an 86.5, and I'm essentially converting it over to the 89 plus model because I think that it works a little better with 134. So that's about it for now. One last thing that comes to mind is I've got to mount this. Factory ambient temperature probe somewhere in here where you won't see it from the grill of the front of the car. And I've got to run some oil lines, some AN10s. And that's about it for now. But pretty good progress today. I'm pretty happy with how things are going to turn out. Again, I really like how this is going to tuck away. So we can just basically put our wrench on here, a ratchet. It's my buddy's Harley Davidson, but you know, you can buy any brand. But yeah, oil changes are going to be a breeze. I just didn't like the way that the factory Aristo oil-cooled oil filter location was really buried, and it really just didn't allow you to do oil changes very easily, in my opinion. And again, I got to tighten that down.
After this, I apparently didn't capture any video of installing the oil cooler or the thermostat, and my apologies for that. So the best I can do is share some photos with you of the brackets that were made and how the oil cooler sits in position. I'd like to thank you for viewing this video today, and if you like this video and like to see other similar content, please subscribe to my channel and also provide a like.